70's. In this video, we're going to be talking about our favorite space horror movies from the 70's. Starting with the cult classic Alien, we go through various movies that spawned before and led to its success. Drawing both horror and sci-fi fans alike, space horror was a genre redefined by Ridley Scott's Alien. Before that, other films were skirting around the theme, but here we're going to talk about 15 movies that include space and horror in their own unique ways and unique combinations. Alright, everybody aboard the ship and let's get ready for a crash landing into some 1970s horror movies. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Alien, 1979. Alien starts as a very basic sci-fi film, and only later do we find out about the space horror aspect. The freighter USCSS Nostromo comes across a mysterious transmission from a nearby moon on its way back to Earth. The crew decides to investigate the source, a derelict alien ship, and discovers a large extraterrestrial with its ribs torn from the inside out. One of the crew members discovers alien eggs and is attacked by a face-hugging alien, seemingly of no consequence. Later, on board the ship, the crew member dies a gruesome death as an alien creature bursts from their chest, letting loose a killer alien onto the ship. The film follows the protagonist, Ripley, as she deals with the alien menace and tries to make it back to Earth in one piece. Alien has aged like a fine wine, and it remains one of the best in the genre it kickstarted some 40 years ago. The music, lighting, and atmosphere set it apart and make it the quintessential space horror movie. The themes of rampant capitalism, human greed, and humans being their own worst enemies is in stark contrast to the idea that humans are also their best allies when it comes to a killer alien rampaging around in the ship. The idea of tricking an expendable human crew into retrieving an alien for research as a bioweapon is quite the shock, only amplified by the alien's proficiency in killing. Sigourney Weaver also established the strong female lead archetype decades before its heyday, and filmmakers today still use her character Ripley as an example of how to make a strong, likable female lead.
Wet paint sign and all.
The Andromeda Strain, 1971. A probe known as Scoop makes a return to Earth, delivering a strange sample for extraterrestrial research. This is unbeknownst to the doctor who finds and opens it, dooming the entire town except for an old man and a crying baby. Two men, Stone and Hill, are sent for quarantine and retrieval. They take the sample and the two survivors with them to the wildfire facility. Within the facility, there are 5 circular levels, the first one being red and the core being pure white, as an indicator of increasing sterility and access privileges. They were also made aware of the nuclear failsafe, which would cause self-destruction within 5 minutes of detecting contamination. Hall was chosen based on the odd man hypothesis to keep a key for the manual override in case the failsafe was unintended. The movie then follows the events as Dr. Stone's crew delves deeper into the levels and discovers the true nature of the contagion and the facility. This film explores the dread of impending doom and a very pragmatic approach to alien threats, which sets it apart from the movies of recent times. The factor of human greed rears its head again as we discover the reason for the facility existing in the first place. Wildfire was made to research alien life in hopes of creating effective bioweapons. There is also the idea of the expendable nature of man's willingness for the greater good, as evidenced by the increasingly inhumane methods of sterilization across levels and the automated nuclear failsafe in case something goes wrong. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. Newton is a humanoid alien who arrives on Earth on a mission to bring back water to his planet. He appears with a British passport in a small town. He quickly used his extensive knowledge to file various patents and earn a vast fortune for himself. The wealth was intended to afford him the construction of a spaceship to accomplish his mission. He meets a woman who unfortunately becomes his downfall as she introduces him to the human vice of drinking. Meanwhile, one of the humans close to him professionally confirms his suspicions that Newton isn't human. Later, Newton successfully crafts his spaceship, but he's detained and imprisoned by the government to be experimented on. Years later, he's released when the prison becomes derelict, but he remains youthful and wealthy. The movie ends with him sending an alien message to his planet and falling into a drunken stupor, thinking about the woman he had loved years ago. Well, this was a movie that was turned into a TV series recently, so it's a guaranteed classic, and for good reason too. The film explores a unique premise where the alien is obviously advanced and yet comes to Earth with a non-invasive and peaceful approach to solving their problems. When you hear that aliens show up on Earth for water, water, it's natural to think that they're gonna arrive with a fleet, destroy everything in their way, and brute force their objectives. So when an alien shows up and benevolently shares their technology and is still betrayed by society, it's kind of depressing on its own. Stay away from alcohol, kids, if not for our sake, then for Newton's. Message from Space, 1978. An evil ruler has led the forces of Gavinus into nearly decimating the planet Gelusia. In an act of desperation, the Gelusian leader sends out 8 probes that travel through space and find worthy candidates for defending Gelusia. The chosen include 3 amateur hotshots, a retired general who resigned honorably due to personal reasons, and the evil ruler's brother. Their shenanigans soon draw the Emperor's attention to Earth, and he places an ultimatum on the planet to surrender or witness its destruction. The movie follows the story of the heroes as they catch space flies. They do eventually get into the hero stuff, to be fair, but what's Vic Morrow doing in this movie? Aside from the general wackiness, it's best watched in the original language, where the subtitle translation is arguably more accurate. While it could be considered a Star Wars clone, I would say this one has enough originality to be otherwise. I could recommend it solely for the visual treat. Almost every scene is drenched in colors, and it brings a very vivid and lively vibe to the average space flick's monochromatic plus pitch black meta. The writing is very Japanese space opera with slapstick humor, sidekicks, and overall silliness. Basically, it's the space opera version of the Seven Samurai. Star Crash, 1978. The plot of Star Crash? Honestly, if I describe it, it would pretty much just sound like I was talking about Star Wars. There's an evil dude, an empire, a princess, and a cute robot. This movie has it all. Here I go. An Imperial starship searches for an evil count, but the crew is attacked, turning insane from the count's secret weaponry. The ship soon crashes and burns, but not before 3 escape pods eject in time. A duo of smugglers are on the run from the space police, and they come across one of the survivors. The smugglers are caught and imprisoned, only to be released by the Galactic Emperor's orders, who thanks them for the recovery and sets them on a mission to find a secret weapon and save the galaxy from the evil Count's plans. If I had to recommend a B movie, this is one of the best of the bunch. What stands out to us the most is how the actors acknowledge the goofiness of it all and seem to be enjoying every bit of the ridiculous story themselves. Although it's hard to believe the actors stood anywhere except the movie set, the planetary exploration, the Amazonian bikini women's planet trope, and the mysterious yet convenient powers of one of the heroes were oddly interesting. Not often do we get something that's so bad that it's good, and this is a prime example. Solaris, 1972. Chris Kelvin, a psychologist, is sent to a decades-old station in orbit of the planet Solaris. He's to assess the viability of the project as the 3 station crew members are all going through personal crises and the station is in a strange disarray. When Kelvin catches fleeting glimpses of other people not supposed to be there, he understands what the crew members are facing and what has been happening throughout the decades of researching the planet. Kelvin soon comes across an entity eerily similar to his wife, who had passed away 10 years ago. The crew members explain the nature of Solaris to him, and they hatch a plan to send Kelvin's brainwave pattern towards the planet to communicate with it. What happens next is worth watching the movie to find out. This one is on the philosophical side of things. Although there's not much space here, the enigmatic and truly alien life form that is the planet Solaris is pretty interesting. The traumatic experience of seeing your loved one appear out of thin air and evolve as a being of their own is a very unique kind of horror. The ending of the movie went pretty crazy, and it leaves you with a sense of grief for the protagonist. After the movie, you're clearly left with one question: is Solaris heaven? It does offer you your loved ones for as long as you live, but it might also be hell, mocking you by creating mere caricatures of people composed from your memory. We're left to wonder what would have happened to the planet after the incident, if more people arrive at the station or if the project has been abandoned forever, whether Kelvin finds peace or condemns himself.
I've made some calculations about this.
Phase 4, 1974. An interstellar phenomenon has seemingly affected the creature with the highest population on Earth, ants. The hard-working insects soon evolve and form a hive mind in what is considered Phase 1. Later, they evolve further and set out to accomplish Phase 4. 2 scientists set out to investigate the phenomenon and the strange behavior of the ants back when the phenomenon struck the ant population. The ants attack a nearby farm, which prompts the scientists to learn the language of the ants and try to understand their motives. Unfortunately, the other scientist grows frustrated and decides to eliminate the ants. ants. The misguided actions led the ants to an all-out war against humans, leading to consequences that the scientists could never have imagined. There's almost no space in this movie at all, except for the plot device arriving from space and allowing a forced evolution for the ant population. In case you didn't know, ants outnumber us by 2.5 million for every one human. Ants evolving into killing machines is a terrifying prospect, and that's exactly what happens in this film. It's especially eerie in the way that it's filmed, in various macro shots showing the tiny creatures in detail. The true ending was cut out of the movie for an unknown reason, but it has since been made available, and puts things into a better perspective. The beautiful use of color aids in the silent storytelling of the ants, in turn, helps build the fear of them slowly becoming a credible threat to humanity. Also, silly ant noises. Darkstar, 1974. Darkstar is a space comedy about the crew of a ship with the same name. The crew has been assigned to an arbitrary mission to destroy unstable planets. 20 years into their mission, the ship is deteriorating, and the crew has long stopped thinking about the seemingly pointless mission. As they navigate their lives, some incidents make the crew members' routines less monotonous. During the film, we witness a wacky alien pet who spirals out of control, an artificially intelligent thermonuclear payload having an existential crisis, and the crew working hard to convince the bomb to not detonate inside the ship. This is another oddball by none other than the man who created 2001: A Space Odyssey. The film humorously explores monotony and existential dread, and the tone of the film is set right at the beginning when country music plays in the intro credits. While we know what to expect, things go out of order quite soon and leave the viewer confused and intrigued. The alien pet was somehow the inspiration for the xenomorph in the Alien movie, which I refuse to believe, but apparently it's true. I don't want to believe that the pet was a symbolic representation of an alien, but without getting too deep, let's just say it was a dotted beach ball for budgetary reasons. The crew then addresses the bomb situation but fails to do so, resulting in everyone's eventual death. I guess learning the Cartesian doubt is too much for Bomb. The Black Hole, 1979. The USS Palomino comes across an abandoned ship near a black hole. Wondering how the ship stands still under the black hole's gravity, they then try to reach it. The crew of Palomino struggles and barely survives the maneuver, and they realize the ship is the long-lost USS Cygnus. Boarding the ship carefully, they discover the sole survivor, Dr. Hans. Hans briefs them about the ship's condition and shows them a new power source he discovered, which powers an anti-gravitational field around the ship and keeps it safe from the black hole's influence. Noticing the absurd number of robots, one of the crew members investigates, and once the secret is out, they must deal with Hans and make it out alive. The black hole feels quite normal until we come across the androids. They give uncanny valley vibes, and for good reason. We soon find out the sinister secret and discover that the Doctor is completely insane. From then on, the movie changes into a kind of horror movie with killer androids and the need to escape the doomed ship. The setting with the black hole and the anti-grav device is a really cool plot point, and the entire movie is about a man's descent into insanity as he turns everyone in his crew into droids and becomes lonely, finally deciding to end it all for his glorious purpose. As a scientist, he only needed observers for his experiment, but once he got that, he was ready to go into the event horizon. And yeah, being chased around with killer droids who were formerly humans is a unique kind of horror in itself. Future World, 1976. A sequel to the classic Westworld, the story continues 3 years after the accident and closure of Westworld. Delos Corporation is back at it again, this time with a few changes. To improve the public image, reporters Chuck and Tracy are called in to review and visit one of the worldscapes. Chuck is quite suspicious of Delos after the Westworld accident and looks into acquiring any new information confirming his suspicions. Eventually, the reporters choose to visit Future World, out of Spa World, Medieval World, and Roman World. The same night, the reporters are drugged before sleep, and they're cloned without consent, along with other visitors. After some more investigation, they figure out that Delos plans to clone the rich and powerful and use them for nefarious purposes. The reporters must bring this story to the world, but first, they'll have to escape Future World alive. Future World can be categorized as a dystopian horror, where the true evil lies in megacorpos and their unending greed. It follows the trope of robotic clones replacing people and the horror of a realized Capgras delusion. There's a very touching moment with a park worker bidding goodbye to his faceless mechanical friend. It's a very human moment, and it just goes to demonstrate that the world isn't devoid of hope, and there could have been a better purpose for the robots than just killing and replacing other humans. There was a possibility for them to coexist in harmony. Unlike the prequel, the robots in Future future world are largely confined to servant roles, which meant that they were just doing so-called menial jobs for the most part. An interesting twist was when Duffy confronted the reporters and told them of his plan, and it was revealed that he was a robot as well. Was he a clone? Was Delos truly under human control anymore? Or was the leadership a victim of their own wickedness? What if the human Duffy had different intentions but was replaced, and the clone changed plans to ensure the survival of his kind? The same could be said about Dr. Schneider. You can never know. Silent Running. 1972. The film starts off with the premise that the Earth's biosphere is somehow collapsing, and humanity must create arcs to transport plants and animals away from Earth until the planet can recover. USS Valley Forge is one such arc, and the film follows the crew of this ship. For some unexplained reason, the crew is ordered to jettison the habitat pods in space, effectively dooming the life within. The crew complies with the order, except for the protagonist, who kills his crew in defiance of the order. Alone, he must now use robots to take care of the habitats and manage the ship. This dude must have been an inspiration for hardcore environmentalists, to be honest. The film unfortunately falls flat on its exceptional premise, as the world building and storytelling fail to support the narrative. Regardless, the film deals with the protagonist facing a trolley problem and choosing a solution for it that most people would never have imagined. The human-robot relationship is interesting, and it always reminds you of what he did to create the situation. Although it's not really space horror, the film unfortunately comes across as a weird slasher where the rest of the crew are victims with no personality, and the protagonist has a just cause to kill them all. You don't want to delve too deep into the stuff about the arcs, because that opens too many plot holes. If humanity could create arcs that big, what's stopping them from creating colony ships like the ones in WALL-E, or the O'Neill cylinder? Regardless of the lost potential of this film, you have to respect the decision the protagonist made, and even when it's hard to root for him, I ended up rooting for him anyway. The Alien Factor, 1978. The Earth becomes a free-for-all buffet when an alien spaceship crashes and unleashes its inhabitants, who are ravenous. The town's mayor is hilariously not at all concerned. He's more interested in keeping his pet project on schedule at an amusement park. And also, of course, a mysterious stranger arrives to save the day. Besides that, women scream in horror, and maybe the men scream less, but it's mostly the same. The film is pretty much that. DIY films from this era are so hilariously bad, but you can't deny the effort and fun the cast seem to be having. This film is a must-watch, and I don't understand why it's not more popular. Sometimes movies don't need to have complex plots, or character development, or any of that jazz. Well, not truly horror. Could it be perceived as horror? Because the alien monsters are out eating everyone? Perhaps with real CGI and gore, it would be a bit more believable. The mayor is a good example of giving up before you even begin. The man just chose to ignore the problem, be it out of his priorities or knowing he's helpless against extraterrestrials. It's a very realistic politician. The hero is a typical hero who does hero things and saves the day. I appreciate the humor in crediting the three actors who were having the time of their lives in the monster suits. Although the movie isn't that deep, I keep thinking about how we consume animals and plants without a moral dilemma. What if it's the same for those aliens? As far as they're concerned, they might have just gotten stranded in a space jungle full of wild berries to consume to survive until help arrives. Horror Express, 1972. The film follows passengers along the Trans-Siberian Railway. They soon realize they're trapped and a killer alien is on the loose. Professor Saxton is carrying with him the frozen remains of a primitive humanoid from Shanghai to Moscow in the hopes that the humanoid might be a missing evolutionary link for humans. His rival, Wells, sends a porter to investigate the crate and find out why Saxton is being so secretive about his findings. The poor porter is the first victim, and the humanoid is set loose on the train. With an autopsy, Wells deduces that the humanoid steals the skills and memories of its victims. Later, the threat is considered to have been dealt with when the humanoid is shot to death. Little do they know they have truly unleashed this monstrosity. Well, most people might know Sir Christopher Lee as the actor who played Saruman. I personally know him as Scaramanga. The protagonist was a legend, so it naturally skewed my attention toward the actor rather than the film. Besides that, the film is enjoyable, even if it uses the tried and tested kitchen sink approach. I loved the twist, twist, when the true nature of the threat was revealed, it actually turns out to be a humanoid monster, later showing its true self as a formless being who inhabits living beings. I also liked the killing approach of the extraterrestrial. Unlike killer alien movies, this one shows true intelligence by being optimal. It only chooses to kill those who could possess the information necessary for it to build a spaceship and leave the planet it's been stranded on for millions of years. Saxton later discovers its weakness for light, and the alien bargains with him. How often do you see that? Normally, aliens are almost always so much more advanced that we're like insects for them, and they never need to appeal to us for anything. They hold the bargaining chip. This is probably the first time I've seen an advanced life form ready to make a deal to escape its involuntary vacation. Unfortunately, Saxton refuses, and all the victims turn to zombies, which was a really cool ability, speaking truthfully. Laser Blast, 1978. Oh boy, this movie has been described as a series of events somehow forming a plot. You know the infinite monkey theorem? The script for Laser Blast was a result of that. Here's the plot. A green humanoid wanders aimlessly in a desert on Earth, and he's soon attacked by two reptilian aliens, who disintegrate it and leave behind its arm cannon and pendant. A disgruntled teenager, Billy, is angry at his mom for going on a trip and leaving him alone. He visits his girlfriend, gets kicked by her grandfather, and later ends up wandering in that same desert where he comes across the arm cannon and immediately holds the left click, destroying his surroundings. Billy then proceeds to keep the weapon and slowly turns green due to the pendant's influence, which wreaks havoc. Meanwhile, the aliens are told to return to Earth to retrieve the weapon. A strange series of events follows, and the aliens deal with the green menace once again. This movie raises the fascinating idea that maybe these aliens and humans aren't that different. The reptilians do their job efficiently, except they make the mistake of forgetting the weapon behind. The fact that the budget of this film probably came from between the couch cushions doesn't help give it much of a horror movie vibe either. It's pretty ridiculous that this teenager is somehow able to use alien technology so effortlessly. In stark contrast, the movie Arrival depicts us not even being able to understand the alien language, let alone their technology. I also love the idea that the green humanoid could have been, in fact, another human corrupted by the weapon. The same thing happens to Billy as he turns green and completes the karmic cycle. The Alpha Incident, 1978. This one's interesting. A space probe returns from Mars with an absolutely killer organism. It has the potential to wipe out almost all life on Earth. At least the life forms have a brain and need to sleep, but for plot-driving reasons, the sample is carried by train, and when the train makes a stop to change engines, an inept employee breaks containment, unleashing the brain-exploding potential of the alien and infecting everyone in the train and the station. The area is quickly quarantined, and the infected must avoid falling asleep until scientists create an antidote. Somehow, this leads to helicopters in the night, the government giving the so-called antidote capsules to the patients, gory brain explosions, and, of course, a nude scene. The idea of a space contagion isn't a novel one, although a contagion that swells brains and causes explosive damage is interesting, even more so when it's completely avoidable, since the infected could seemingly leave the quarantine if they don't contact anyone. The true horror is mostly psychological, as the contagion basically creates a Russian sleep experiment situation and forces the patients to stay awake for as long as they can. If you're aware of the experiment, it was found that people become progressively unhinged over days of lack of sleep and becoming completely animalistic after 3 to 4 days of no sleep. The theme of inevitable doom is what makes the story interesting. I say inevitable since the situation is made much worse by false hope from the government. Marvelous verdict! Well, it's safe to say that each and every one of these films is a blast, some of them quite literally. I think there's no greater joy than watching terrible movies and enjoying them with your friends. It's a fact that a lot of art is ahead of its time period and only truly appreciated decades later. These movies, while not all blockbusters and definitely not all art, individually paved the way for modern space horror films. Some of them challenged the viewer with relatively newer types of horror, such as existential and psychological horror. Almost all of them used the theme of space as a plot catalyst to varying degrees, and some of them included robots, and robots are neat, so, there's that. That's all we've got for you this time, but we hope you enjoyed the breakdown, and if you did, consider leaving a like and a subscribe. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.